Hey, everybody. This is a video that was a press briefing by the White House. U.S. Attorney General John Ashcroft and FBI Director Robert Mueller address the throngs of reporters about the latest investigation into the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks and the uh, search and rescue of people in New York and Washington, D.C. And this is actually September 12th. This is the very next day. So like I always do in the breakdown videos, I pause and play and give my own additional thoughts.
This investigation and recovery is a highly coordinated effort. I want to thank all of the federal, state, local agencies that have worked tirelessly yesterday and today to help the victims of this act of war find relief and to help the United States of America locate the people who are responsible for these terrible acts of war. Immediately after the first report of a plane crashing into the World Trade Towers, numerous federal agencies coordinating with the White House mobilized their resources. Throughout the day, secure video conferences took place among the National Security Council, the Department of Justice, the Department of State, the Department of Defense, Department of Treasury, FEMA, CIA, the FAA, and other federal agencies.
You know what's fascinating about this is while this is going on, while the TV, the world is watching this press briefing, right? What's happening behind the scenes is much more nefarious, much more shadowy, and that is the assault on civil liberties, the manipulation of the Geneva Conventions regarding foreign enemy combatants. During this process, and also the implementation of the continuity of government, as well as the Project for New American Century. And what I mean by that is that there was a group inside the White House who are known as uh, the neoconservative Israeli First Crowd. People like Richard Pearl, Douglas Feith, Paul Wolfowitz, Dick Cheney, Scooter Libby, and others, and Richard Armitage. You know, these are people that want to shape American foreign policy into a predominant military uh, powerhouse. And in the Project for New American Century, um, there are parts dedicated to how to expedite the process of having U.S. dominance over the entire world. And of course, everybody knows about the part that they needed a new Pearl Harbor type of terrorist effect to implement this change. So during the 1990s, I'm going to go into deeper now. During the 1990s, there were a number of terrorist incidents. You had the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, Bajinka plot, the bombings of the U.S. embassies in Nairobi and Kenya, the Millennium Plot, and 9/11. So you had these big nefarious plots. These are not guerrilla type plots that we see today. For example, like the ISIS member from Houston who drove into a group of people in New Orleans. Al Qaeda back then used a much different outline in terms of their terrorist activity, which was to make it a grandiose, a very egregious operation that's much more open, that would give bin Laden a face. Al Qaeda does not do that now. They change their tactics to uh, much more less open, less obvious. That makes them even far more dangerous. Anyway, while all these terrorist acts were going on, you could tell over time. And there was very few people DJ Thermal Detonator, Paul Thompson, John Gold, Robbie Martin, early days. I'm talking about early days before me, where Iraq was being blamed for this. And Iraq has nothing to do with Salafist terrorism. That's Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Turkey, Pakistan, right? So Iraq is trying to be blamed. And people tend to forget that in the 1993 World Trade Center, this is why, DJ Thermodeta and myself really pushed this period in history, because it's connected to 9/11, because it's not the terrorist act, it's foreign policy, U.S. imperialism. It's connected to it. They're trying to blame a certain country for these attacks to implement what? Foreign policy guidelines. It's always about the bigger picture, right? So while this is going on, Pearl and Wolfowitz, and they made a group called the Office of Special Plans, dedicated to connect Iraq to the 9/11 attacks. And when Bush told FBI Director Mueller to do so, he couldn't. He went to the director of the CIA, George Tenet, and basically they went to the Egyptians, found out the Egyptians had an alleged terrorist in Sheikh Ibn al-Libi, allegedly a terrorist training camp executive. And they tortured the living hell out of trying to find a connection between the Ba'athist government in Iraq and al-Qaeda in procuring chemical and biological weapons, in which he told them they did. And later on found out that he said this to stop the torture. But by then it was too late. We invaded Iraq in April of 2003, I think. Don't quote me on the month. And of course, it led to the deaths of approximately 1.5 million people, and of course, the damage to the American psyche of the soldiers who were there. Not every soldier's, a criminal or a monster. Some of them were, I would say, a vast majority of them were brainwashed or victims of brainwashing to believe that, they're saving democracy. When you're 22, you're not really learning about the world, and especially when the military trained you to never question and just follow, blindly. Yeah, you can commit to terrorist, you could be, a mass murderer without even realize what you're doing. And then when you step outside of yourself, outside of that military, statute that they made you into, is when you realize, oh my God, your morals come back to you. Not every soldier goes through this. I'm not saying every soldier in the U.S. military is a monster and they're brainwashed. But a lot of these young kids are like 22, 20. That's why they go after the young, shape their minds. So the point is that there's much more to 9/11 than what's being displayed on the screen. But you got to have a general understanding. You can't let speculation run wild because there's no cap. And that's why I do videos like this.
Both the president and the vice president presided over a number of cabinet and sub-cabinet meetings and video conferences.
Yeah, sure they did.
Continuity of government plans were put into effect. Within the Department of Justice, our full resources were put into operation immediately. As I will explain in greater detail in a few moments.
Now, in November of 2001, the Bush White House, very few officials were knowledgeable of this. Very few officials went to the White House counsel, people like, John Yoo and Alberto Gonzales. What they did was they found loopholes in the Geneva Convention. They also found that they could use this terrorist act to expand the president's war powers. Because remember, CIA in 1999 declared war on al-Qaeda. So that means that the State Department went along with it. And I never heard of anything like that in my life, that we went to war with a terrorist organization instead of a country. Because if you go to war against a country, it's a specific area of the world you're going to war with. But if you're going to war against an ideology, that could be anywhere. I think it was an ingenious idea by Vice President Dick Cheney and Pentagon officials to basically go along with this. but it fits well with the neocons that were already in Bush's White House. And of course, the benefits went to Israel and Saudi Arabia in the Gulf. Because who do we end up destroying, past and currently? Syria, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, some parts of Pakistan, North Africa. A lot of countries were affected by our decision to use violence, extrajudicial violence. Not to mention the capture and rendition of innocent Arabs and Muslims, whether they be Arab or Persians, Algerians, Yemenis, and the torture methods that we used. I have documents, I have downloaded files for the last 17 years, this year becoming my 17th studying the events of 9/11. And, reading these redacted testimonies and including the program outlines for the rendition program called SEER under James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen is fucking horrifying. In fact, I'm dedicating an entire playlist of the CIA's rendition and capture and rendition torture program. You have to have an awareness of what this government is capable of doing. And look, you may not want to believe that, oh, they'll do this to us. They'll never do this to us. Look at what we do to people that we don't know. Do you think the government knows you or cares about you? No. This is the reason why I'm morally separated from the government. I consider the government my sworn enemy on a moral basis. They don't have morals.
These resources have been deployed both to investigate this act of war and to assist victim survivors and victim families. But let me stress that this is not simply a Department of Justice effort. The response of the federal government across the board has been, I believe, from the President of the United States to the rescue workers, magnificent. I'll now turn to the information that the response we have been making has developed. I'll give you
John Ashcroft's thoughts on the Bush White House is going to change over time, because while he's talking about search and rescue and about assistance to New York and Washington and Pennsylvania, right? Bush's White House also, behind the scenes again, went to the NSA under Director Michael Hayden and started talking about how to collect data. But Hayden told them, my hands are tied. I'm restricted from accessing data without a warrant. What did the Bush White House and legal counsel do? They went to Director Hayden. They went to the NSA signals director, I think Maureen Baginski, and they basically said, we're going to allow for you in the shadows. We're going to allow for you to go to providers like Verizon and AT&T to collect information on Americans without a warrant. That still goes on today. And it's part of the Patriot Act, or now they call it the USA Dream Act, I think it's called, or something, USA Act or something like that. And every president, from the Republicans to the Democrats, supported this bill. Very few went against it. One of them, Ron Wyden, who I respect greatly, one of the few that I tend to like from the federal government.
the information that we can give you. However, we will give you only facts that we can confirm.
Facts.
You may be hearing things that we have not told you, but some people have the luxury of speculating. We won't speculate, but we'll only give.
The irony of this, right? Because, yeah, they didn't speculate. They just told you an incomplete narrative, right? That's why there's no such thing as an official narrative. The Truth Movement says, oh, the government had an official narrative. No, they didn't. They didn't. They had an incomplete one because their investigations were incomplete. How can you have a narrative, an official narrative, if only they saw specific information? Because not everybody in the federal government had access to, the CIA's files regarding Bin Laden and Al Qaeda and the torture methods they were going through in the rendition program. They didn't want to know. They were on a need-to-know basis. They're the ones in front of the camera. Do you think George Bush planned 9/11? and this guy's a half a retard. You're gonna trust him not to say anything? Come on, grow up, right? No, the people who are in charge or who are the influencers in abusing our civil liberties don't want to be in front of TV. People like John Yoo, Alberto Gonzalez, and David Addington, those people, right?
Give you confirmed facts. And also, we must be careful to protect confidential intelligence sources and the methods of our intelligence so we do not compromise this ongoing investigation or the capacity of this nation to undertake.
Oh my God. If only Ashcroft knew what the CIA and the NSA were withholding from the State Department and from the FBI, because they had no idea, right? Again, a need to know basis. An attack is coming. We don't know when, how, why. Now, I'm not saying the NSA had those details. I don't know, because we don't have access to this information if it exists. Certainly. I mean, that's obvious, right? So I'm going to assume with certain whistleblowers like Thomas Drake, who I consider the most important and biggest whistleblower of my lifetime, and I'm 55, I will trust him in regards to that, just the agency alone, the NSA, had enough information to stop the 9/11 attacks outside of any agency, right? That includes the CIA, the FBI, the Diplomatic Security Services, the Israeli Mossad, the Saudi General Intelligence Directorate, also known as the Mahabeth, right? God knows what they have, because they're the ones on the ground inside the United States monitoring who? The hijackers, all of them. Well, how the fuck did the Israelis and Saudi know about these guys unless they were doing their own operation before the Americans did? Or did the CIA and NSA know about the Israelis and they said, well, share information with us to stop these attacks? Now, what I'm saying is speculation, but also there's fact to it. Yes, there was an Israeli it's the largest foreign intelligence operation that we know of that happened in the years 2000, 2001. It involved the Israelis and Saudis. The Saudis is much more public, the Israelis, not so much. But, thank God for the Gerald Shea memo, because we have fucking names to faces and what they were doing here. The speculation is what information they had, right? If they had information that could have stopped 9/11, they certainly didn't share it. But think about it. If they were monitoring the hijackers and, their strength is signals intelligence, espionage, spying, they would be listening to what they have to say. It's not like these hijackers were hidden inside the country. They lived openly using their real names. Maybe that was the fucking reason why. Now, I'm not going to say that, hey, Israel or Saudi Arabia knew about the attacks, knew about the who, the what, the when, the where, the why. But where there's smoke, there's fire. But I reach to my followers. Please use discretion when using speculation. Announce it at first. Be responsible. That's all I ever ask of you. Don't go in front of the TV like Christopher Bolin or those idiots in Loose Change and then, start making these wild accusations you can't prove. And for years, they did this because nobody held them account until people like DJ Thermodetonator, even Ryan Dawson to an extent, myself, Sean Russell, Darren Harvey, we're probably the only ones left that criticized these people openly, the 9/11 Truth Movement, because what they did was basically they made so many outrageous conspiracy theories, like I said, that had no cap, and the public looked at them like a joke. And by default, myself and DJ Thermodetonator and the others, we're lumped in. And I'm, oh God, I'd be horrified if the public thought I was a joke. Like, we don't take you seriously. To build a reputation takes a lifetime. It takes seconds to destroy. And I'm really fortunate that people intimate with 9/11, tend to, like me for what work I produce. I don't ever tell myself I'm the best researcher out there. I think that's ridiculous to say so because I'm learning every day. Every day, I learned a little bit of tidbit of news because I'm always searching for information.
Such investigations as this. The 4 planes were hijacked by between 3 and 6 individuals per plane, using knives and box cutters, and in some...
That's key. Remember what he said. 3 to 6 hijackers. Why start with those numbers? I'll fucking tell you why. At the time, nobody knew about this. So it's, over the years, we found out why. Where did the 3 hijackers claim come from? It came from Flight 93. Where did that information come from? The phone calls. The calls that the truth woman say didn't happen. And basically, if the U.S. Attorney General, the FBI, knew that there were only 3 hijackers on his plane, but then later on, as you'll see in future, when I do a breakdown video on then, by September, I think 24th, the FBI announced how many hijackers there were. There were 4 on 93. Why is he saying 3? Because there were probably only 3 on Flight 93. I'm not saying that's the real number, but that's what the claim, where they're using as information. They're using the phone calls. There were more phone calls on Flight 93 than any other plane. 6 people, 4 customers, 2 flight attendants said there were 3 hijackers on the plane. Now, the 6 hijackers, that's referring to Flight 77, American Airlines Flight 77 that crashed the Pentagon. Where did this number come from? It came from a phone call by a flight attendant, Renee May, who told her mother, who lives in Las Vegas, Ma, there are 6 hijackers on this plane. Ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you that if the State Department or the Attorney General and the Director of the FBI knew about this, but then went ahead and reformatted the number of hijackers there were, why did they do that? Was it basically to show a cover-up? A cover-up of what? A cover-up of a theory that I believe exists, that myself and DJ Dumber Detonator have been working on for years. And we don't have all the information, but we summarize that there was a mole inside Al-Qaeda, inside the plane's operation. And it might be that Ziad Jarrah was one of them. We don't know about the rest. Maybe Mohammed Atta, maybe. But that they needed a 6 hijacker on Flight 77 because Hani Hanjo was not a very good pilot. Even though he could crash the plane, doesn't take an expert, right? So that's where these numbers come from. You have to listen. This is the reason why I have to harp on this, because it's so important. You have to read the 9/11 Commission report. You have to read the Joint House inquiry. You have to watch these press briefings, because in the very early stages, in these reports, in these press briefings, the truth comes out because there is no set of a script yet. They don't have all their ducks in a row yet. This is why it's so important whenever a big event happens, watch the news right away, because the truth slips out.
Cases making bomb threats. Our government has credible evidence that the White House and Air Force One were targets.
They weren't.
A number of the suspected hijackers were trained as pilots.
Yes.
In the United States.
And by the way, the FBI, for you truthers out there, to think that all the agencies are in on it, they're not. The FBI had a number of whistleblowers. I got very fortunate over the years to interview some of them. Colleen Rowley in Minnesota, Mark Rossini, one of the biggest whistleblowers of my lifetime, and man, I respect. Ken Williams in Phoenix. You know, these are the people that basically came out and warned the FBI about information regarding a number of Arab extremists that were learning to train in flight schools in the United States, specifically in Oklahoma and Phoenix. Phoenix is the home of Arizona, being the home of the most flight schools anywhere in the United States. The Phoenix memo. It talks about a number of people, Arab extremists with terrorist ties that were training in flight schools. This came from information from an informant named Henry Yellen, who was a Muslim convert. And I think his name was Yaqub or something like that. Don't hold me to it, but it came from him. And the FBI didn't act on this information. The FBI didn't act on the information from Colleen Raleigh, who wanted to get a foreign, a FISA warrant, a foreign warrant to search Moussawi's belongings. Mark Rossini coming across information that, two Al-Qaeda operatives, known Al-Qaeda operatives, were inside the United States, told not to share it because it was CIA information. These people did try. And, their efforts should be rewarded.
Justice has undertaken perhaps the most massive and intensive investigation ever conducted in America. The full resources of the FBI, the Justice Department's Criminal Division, the U.S. Attorney's offices, the INS, and other components have been brought to bear and will be focused in this endeavor.
Now, I've preached over the years that had this information been shared, 9/11 could have been prevented. It could have been prevented 6 years prior to 9/11 because, like I said, and very few people have covered this, DJ Dorodenia, Paul Thompson, Kevin Fenton, just to name a few, Tom Secker did, Kyle Hentz, regarding Bajinka plot, the threat to airliners to be used as weapons. The Philippines police report detailed this hidden operation, that there were going to be 10 planes that were hijacked along with the, 11 or 12 planes that were going to be outfitted with bombs. Had the Bajinka plot been successful, would have dwarfed the 9/11 attacks. Dwarfed it. It would have been fucking horrifying. Just to know that there were going to be 11 or 12 airliners, all with timing mechanism bombs, micro bombs, as Ramsey Youssef called them, to have them all explode 1 minute of each other over the Pacific. Planes that were coming from Southeast Asia to the United States and from the United States to Southeast Asia. While this is going on, operatives inside the United States, and this is 1995, by the way, were going to get, they were going to manually hijack planes, just like they did in 9/11. But it would involve 10 planes and have them crash into the Sears Tower, the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, the Washington Monument, the Golden Gate Bridge, nuclear facility, Jacob Javits building. I mean, all the, Empire State Building. Imagine the shock and the sheer external and internal damage this would have caused. 10 times worse than 9/11, 10 times worse. And this information to the threats of airlines was given to the FBI, given to the Federal Aviation Administration. What did they do? Nothing. After the 9/11 attacks, Ashcroft announced all these agencies are going to take the strictest security measures. But you had information that could have prevented this. 9/11. It comes from Bajinka plot. You didn't act on it. Why?
Throughout the day and into the night last night, Deputy Attorney General Larry Thompson and Assistant Attorney General Michael Chertoff, who is not with us at this moment, and I were present at the FBI's Strategic Information and Operations Center, together, of course, with the director and a number of other individuals. The Justice Department is working closely with investigators, the FAA, and the intelligence community, including the CIA, the NSA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the Defense Department. Numerous agencies have assigned personnel to the SIOC at the FBI to coordinate investigative efforts so that information which is received on these premises becomes immediately available to the cooperating agencies. And I might add that we reciprocate with similar deployments in a variety of other settings. The Justice Department's Terrorism and Violent Crime Section is coordinating the response of the U.S. Attorney's offices nationwide. These agencies have a presence at the SIOC here in the FBI 24 hours a day and are coordinating efforts both in the United States and worldwide around the clock.
What this basically did, the 9/11 attacks, was have federal, state, local, and even the international security services and the intelligence services to break open the walls, so to speak. These walls exist for the protection of the civilian population. Now, because of the 9/11 attacks, these walls don't exist. So that means every agency, local, state, federal, international, all have access to you, the civilian, me, right? Without a warrant, without nothing. That's what the 9/11 attacks did. That's what the federal government did. That's what the intelligence services did. Why would Israel need information on American civilians? Why would Saudi Arabia need information on American civilians? Why? Why did the federal agencies in the United States share this information with Israel and Saudi Arabia and other intelligence services like the British MI6 or the Canadian CMC or Australia or New Zealand, home to the biggest security signals intelligence services in the world, made up of called the Five Eyes? Who talks about that, by the way? Nobody. Remember, big picture.
Investigators are reviewing intelligence and have received numerous credible leads. Command posts have been established at all crime scenes. Evidence response teams and the FBI's disaster squad have been deployed to the crash sites. The recovery of bodies and the collection of evidence is ongoing at the Pentagon and at the crash site in Somerset County, Pennsylvania.
And to you, no planers, that think that, the federal agencies, all these agencies, it's so many, and that will involve thousands of people, or all just planting plane debris. Or if you're like one fucking retard in architects and engineers whose name I will not mention, it's a woman who thinks that plane debris was planted inside the walls of the Pentagon and a bomb exploded and it sent plane debris all over the fucking lawn. I mean, the sheer idiocy of the 9/11 truth movement cannot be understated. I mean, you have to be a sheer retard to believe that, right? Or you're like Citizens Investigation Team, these two fucking drug addicts, that a plane flew over the Pentagon and a bomb exploded at the same time the plane flew over the Pentagon. You just got to be a retard. Everyone saw the plane crash into the building. I could care less what idiots like Craig McKee or Adam Ruff and these nobodies that are still being given, serious consideration by people in the truth movement for some reason. It's fascinating. Rebecca Roth wears a fucking wig. It's not even a real name. Christopher Bolin, a fucking racist. Oh, Israel's involved with everything. I mean, these people are fucking terrible. They and you know what? They surely don't respect you, because if they did, they wouldn't give you these retarded theories to have you go down a dead end for the rest of your life. They take advantage of their own followers and then ask for money in return. I hate these people. Alex Jones, Jim Fetzer, John Lear, Morgan Reynolds, Judy Wood, and currently Richard Gage, who is a piece of shit. These people intentionally lie and spread this ridiculous, it's not even good propaganda. It's not even good. The conspiracy theories these people propagate are so stupid. They're so fucking stupid. The hijackers are alive. You know, not to go off tangent, but in 2000, I think 12, Kevin Ryan, Christopher Bolin, and Richard Gage went to the Nation of Islam. Imagine, imagine these three guys, obviously fucking white because they look like, they're fucking frozen. They're going before this throng of hundreds, even 1,000. It was a huge guy at the whole thing. And, these people are, they don't like the white man, right? And so these three fucking idiots are up there spreading, the most ridiculous theory. Kevin Ryan says, oh, the hijackers are alive. So the hijackers are alive, but nobody in the truth movement has ever interviewed them. I mean, just right. I mean, holy shit, dude. This is the reason why I hate these people. Because, they intentionally mislead people, their own followers. And, you don't get to know the actual conspiracy of 9/11. And that's why I do critique videos of these people to try and win over these people. I don't make fun of their followers. I only make fun and criticize those self-professed experts. Just yesterday, there was a Zoom meeting between Wayne Costi and two of the biggest, most dumbest people I've ever met in my life in 9/11 regarding 9/11's, discussion. And that's Craig McKee and Adam Rupp, who have zero qualifications, zero work into 9/11. They couldn't even name you, 5 hijackers, and yet they think they're experts, right? Even if you don't want to think that they were involved, they couldn't name you these people. But they'll tell you for certain that a plane didn't crash into the Pentagon. This is the only thing they know, right? They talk about anything else, they don't know it. And you wonder why nobody takes them seriously in general.
Investigators are working with the National Transportation Safety Board to recover the black boxes from the crash sites. The crime scene at the WTC has been secured, but is not yet a crime scene accessible to investigators. The United States Attorney's Office's terrorism units and the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Forces are obtaining the passenger manifests, rental car receipts.
Funny thing is that the CIA had the manifest that night of September 11, 2001. It was given to the DCI, George Tenet. They knew about who was on these planes. And subsequently, allegedly, it was shared to certain people within the FBI. Which, by the way, if that's true, that means the director and the counterterrorism assistant director, Dale Watson, could be planning, not on their own, to implement the narrative about certain hijackers and certain planes. And they later went to, 19 hijackers. 5 on 11, 5 on 77, and 5 on 175, and 4 on 93. But as you heard through John Ashcroft there, this is September 12th, there were hijackers between 3 and 6 on each plane.
Telephone logs, videotape from parking garages, and pay telephone videotape records at all scenes for review and appropriate follow-up interviews. All investigative resources of the FBI's laboratory and crisis response capabilities have been mobilized. Now let me turn this podium over to FBI Director Bob Mueller to talk more about the investigation itself.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I want to start by saying that the men and women of the FBI join the nation in expressing our deep sympathies for the victims of these horrific tragedies and their families. And we, all of us in the FBI, pledge to those directly affected by these attacks that we will leave no stone unturned in our quest to help find those responsible and to.
Incredibly, it would be Robert Mueller to stifle the investigation into the attacks of September 11, 2001 under orders of the Bush White House. It didn't just come from him. He was pressured into not investigating fully and honestly into the Saudi role of the 9/11 attacks. And for you Israelis who are desperate to blame the Jews, I don't give a shit about what you think. The Israelis, all we know is that they indeed were running an illegal operation inside the United States in monitoring not just the hijackers, but the FBI, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the Southwest Laboratories, as well as the associates of these 19 hijackers based in Florida, New Jersey, New York, Virginia, and California. Okay? It was a huge fucking operation. Please go to my Gerald Shea Memorandum playlist. I read each chapter and try to fill in the blanks as best as I could regarding this. It's a very important document. Even the stupid, Jew haters in the 9/11 Truth Movement don't bring this up. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they don't know how to read, or that, just repeating Christopher Bolin points is easier, because these people don't read. Majority of people in the 9/11 Truth Movement do not read. They don't do, video edits like myself or Darren Harvey do, Leo Salvaggio, another phenomenal 9/11 researcher. Please subscribe to him. He's criminally undersubbed. Yeah, very few people do these type of videos. I will, because I'm. It's not for me. It's for not just for me. It's for the public. Look at what they're hiding. Look at what they're not saying. Look at what they're saying. Look at what they're covering up. Look, for God's sakes.
Bring those individuals to justice. Let me turn, if I could, for a moment to the effort that we have undertaken at the FBI to investigate these tragedies. Early after the planes started to fall yesterday, as soon as we heard that there was a particular city that was either a city of origin for a flight or a city such as New York where a flight went in, we established command posts. We have at those command posts and at a number of offices around the country where there are leads, more than 4,000 special agents who are assigned to assist this investigation. 4,000 special agents and 3,000 support personnel.
By the way, the name of the operation was PENTBOMB, Pentagon Twin Towers bombing, right? Now, of course, they're talking about the plane bombing into the World Trade Center. Outside of having bombs inside the World Trade Center, it's very feasible. I don't, this, again, I don't talk about this because I'm not very learned about it. And, my opinions don't count. I don't give a fuck about opinions. So this is the reason why I don't, I wish now that I would have paid a lot more attention to, say the World Trade Center and how, it could have been outlined that it could have been outfitted with, improvised devices or nanothermite and stuff like that. But when I started 9/11, there were far more, credible people talking about this. And I said, I'll never catch up to them. So I started talking about the geopolitics because very few people were talking about it. So, who was behind it, why, who these hijackers were, the intelligence service, it led me down to multiple avenues and studying multiple things that took away time from, studying, engineering, how IEDs work and how demolition works. So that's why you'll, say, well, why don't you talk about World Trade Center 7, 1, and 2? Because for one, I don't want to give my personal thoughts, opinions, because I'm a channel dedicated to just sharing information as is. That's it. My opinions really don't fucking matter. They don't benefit you. go to David Chandler or Wayne Costi or Tony Zambotti, uh, Niels Harrod. Go to those like Leroy Halsey. If you're a follower of his work, go to them. They're much more qualified to speak on the subject than I am. Much more. And that's something the truth movement will never do. They'll never admit their limitations. I will. Again, not to sound like a broken record, I'm not an expert in this field. Some of you basically have said this over the years. Lovely adulations, I believe me. But I never allow for myself to say this because every day I'm still learning about something. So I'm still learning. I'm a student in this fair. Now, I do dedicate a lot of my time to reading information because that's what I have over people, time. And so that's what I concentrate on. But yeah, if you're looking for specifics about 9/11 in certain areas, I don't know even half of 9/11. I just know a small fraction as compared to the information that's out there or hidden.
We have over 400 of our laboratory personnel deployed at the crime scenes in New York City, south of Johnstown in Pennsylvania, and at the Pentagon. And we anticipate this level of resource commitment will continue for the immediate future. In the last 24 hours, we have been addressing two objectives. The first objective is to identify the hijackers on each of the planes.
And up until this time, now look, this is the 12th, and I think it basically was on the 27th that they made the announcement of the hijackers. I forgot. I forgot. I forgot. I think it's the 27th. So they had to wait 15 days to put a photograph on the names of these people. 2 weeks. Why did it take so long?
Identified the hijackers on each of the planes. We then have sought to identify any of their associates remaining in the United States. Our first effort is to identify any associates in the United States who might be related to the hijackers and to remove those associates, investigate, and arrest, given the evidence, those individuals, and to remove any threat to the air system in the future. That is our first objective. The second objective is to gather any and all evidence we have as to whom assisted the hijackers, and not only in this country, but also overseas. We have, in the last 24 hours, taken the manifests and used those as an evidentiary base, and have talked to many of the families of the victims and have successfully, I believe, identified many of the hijackers on each of the 4 flights that went down. We also have identified through a number of leads, principally at the cities of origin, a number of individuals whom we believe may have had something to do with the hijackings, and we are pursuing those leads aggressively.
They had this information for months. Like I said before, you had information from Arizona. By the way, to go back, and again, connected to the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. You have Al-Qaeda affiliates connected to Arizona, even before New York. That's why Arizona is a major hub of Al-Qaeda activity back in the early 90s, when Al-Qaeda was just starting to begin inside the United States using the Maktab al-Khidmat, which is the Arabic name for the Afghan Services Bureau, which, by the way, was based in Arizona New York and other cities, but there was an actual building in New York City. It was called the Al Khifa Refugee Center, which was located on top of the Al Farouk Mosque, where the members of the 19 World Trade Center bombing began, and also later the Landmarks plot, headed by El Said Nasser. Now remember, these are the people that came from, the earlier terrorist groups like the Abu Nidal organization. This is where the main expert, in my opinion, DJ Detonator, concentrates on. And basically, there is a connection between the two, a transfer of extremist Arab power or Arab fundamentalist activity from a secular entity in the ANO to religious entity. Because Abu Nidal, who's the head of the Abu Nidal organization, was indeed a terrorist before bin Laden. But Abu Nidal was a contractor and basically wasn't a nefarious, almost mythical terrorist. Bin Laden, spread the idea of, Wahhabi Islam, right? And this idea can permeate all around the world. So that made him a global terrorist, in which he was named by the FBI as a global terrorist, along with the DIA and the CIA. It's funny because they didn't think Abu Nidal would be a global terrorist. So they said, let's expand the terrorism to all around the world. And that's why, the United States can surveil, can go to war with anybody around the world that harbors terrorism. Fast forward to 9/11. Look what we're doing. Just, so when there is a direct connection between the 93 World Trade Center bombing, the Landmarks plot, to the Bajinka, to the embassy bombings to 9/11, to what we are experiencing today.
Let me conclude at this juncture by emphasizing again the FBI's total and unwavering commitment to this investigation. We will not stop, and as I said before, we will leave no stone unturned until we have determined who was responsible for these attacks on our freedom.
No, you just covered it up.
I would be happy to entertain questions, as I'm sure the Attorney General would.
Director, has there been any arrest of any of these associates that you've identified in the communities of origin?
Now, I understand that there is reporting out there that the FBI has made arrests with regard to the hijacking. That is not accurate. There have been occasions where we have interviewed individuals and come to find that the individual is out of status, and that individual has been detained on an immigration hold. But there,
I think that's referring to Zacharias Moussaoui, because if that's the case, then I don't think this is accurate by Mueller, because after the 9/11 attacks, or on that day, they got the FISA warrant to look into his laptop and to his belongings. And what they found was pretty much incriminating evidence to show that he was connected to the attacks, whether he was involved with the first wave of attacks or second wave. Wait a minute, second wave of attacks? Yeah, there was going to be a second wave of attacks. This is the reason why the closure of the airline industry was so key. And Gerald Arpey, who was the managing director of the FAA at the time, or I think he was the assistant director, basically is a hero, because he made that decision to close, United Airlines. And then, of course, transportation director Norm Mineta put a shutdown on the whole airline industry. These decisions by both Arpey and Mineta saved thousands of lives, because as it comes out now, and believe it or not, it was TMZ that broke the story, but not really. Guess who broke the story and didn't get credit for it? Paul Thompson, DJ Detonator, and myself. I don't know who else covered the United Airlines Flight 23 story. I know of no other. I could be wrong. But I made a podcast episode with Richard Cox, my co-host on The Darkened Hour, 5 years, I think 4 or 5 years prior to the MTMZ series. We talked about it. And DJ Detonator, who's the reason why I knew about this, shared this story with me. It's the only reason why I knew about it. And I read in Paul Thompson's terrorist timeline about United Airlines Flight 23. But I later on, I got more interested when DJ Detonator told me about it. And I studied it, and then, of course, I related into a podcast. But there were a number of planes that had weapons, that were outfitted with bombs, all planes, and CNN reported on this. In fact, this is the reason how I knew DJ thermal detonator. I think he made a post regarding additional planes, and I read this in a novel by some German author. And the only people I knew that covered it were people like Paul Thompson, Kevin Fenton at the time, and Kyle Hentz and John Judge, right? The early, real truth movement, right? Not these idiots that came later. But yeah, very few people covered it. That is the reason why, you know, the shutdown of the airline industry was unprecedented, because later on, if you want to believe it or not, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, take this with a grain of salt, said that there were going to be a second wave of attacks. Zacharias Moussaoui, who wasn't tortured, who acted as his own defense, and who the trial judge in Columbia, Virginia, said that he found Moussaoui to be highly competent, said that he was involved with the second wave of attacks after he was demoted from the initial wave. Really? Why did the FBI cover this up? Because they had to go with the narrative of 19 hijackers. And also, if there were other planes involved and there was more suspects, what would this do? It would probably harm the airline industry for years. People would not be susceptible to flying if they knew that there were a lot more planes to be hijacked, and there were going to be.
Have been no arrests relating to these hijackings at this point.
Talk to and the people that you've identified, are these people that have been under FBI's watch in the past relating to other kinds of terrorism activities? Are they people who you're familiar with?
As we identify names, there may be one or more individuals with whom we have information as to involvement with individual terrorist groups.
We've seen activity today in Boston, Rhode
And this would probably, because it's, of course, the FBI doesn't announce these things because they're investigating them. But I would be remiss if it was Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman, who currently was in jail at this point, and Ramzi Youssef was another one, because on 9/11, Ramzi Youssef, who's doing 200 and I think 50,000 years in Super Atomax, Colorado, the FBI went to him and put him in another cell because they feared that he was involved with the attacks, and he wasn't. But because this guy was so dangerous, more dangerous than bin Laden, these Baluchi clans, like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi Youssef, these are far more dangerous motherfuckers than bin Laden. Bin Laden was very influential. But in terms of, contracting and planning terrorist attacks, go with those guys.
Island in southern Florida. Can you walk us through, in any of these cases, and give us any guidance on why these particular individuals?
Another individual he could be mentioning that didn't mention really was Zacharias Subra, who is the main target of investigation in the Phoenix memo.
Have been stopped, and what the FBI is doing?
We have in Boston, my understanding also in Providence and also in Miami, we have leads indicating the presence at some point in time of either the hijackers themselves, and we are attempting to recreate the travels of each of the hijackers on the planes, either the hijackers themselves or their associates, and consequently we are following all leads with interviews, with search warrants, and whatever investigative techniques.
Florida, the hub of the Hamburg South, the hub of the planes operation, where they went to flight schools. Mohammed Atta, Ziad Jarrah, Moen al-Shahid, the alleged pilot hijackers of Flight 11, 175, and 93. Okay. With living near by them were the Israeli art students that were involved. People like Hanan Sarfati, who, again, go to my Gerald Shea memorandum playlist because I talk about all of this, and it really delves into the nefarious and very ubiquitous world of the intelligence services, foreign and domestic.
Are necessary to obtain the evidence.
Last question, they've got to get to the White House for a meeting.
How many associates, Mr. Mueller, do you think? And how many were workers at the airport?
I can't give you a definitive number on the associates.
Have you linked this to Osama bin Laden?
Wow. The last question is a fucking bombshell, and he walked away from it, and rightfully so. Now we're talking. The assistants in these airports, where, of course, myself, DJ Thermodetonator, and the select few like Paul Thompson and Kevin Fenton talk about the incident involving Eric Gill of Oregon Bright Security, and seeing 6 men approach him on September 10th at the Logan International Airport. And what were they trying to do? Entering the tarmac. The tarmac is where the airplanes for future flights are being prepped by airline workers, right? Well, it comes out later that 2 of the men that he saw were involved with the hijackings of Flight 175 and 11. Well, what the fuck? And Flight 77, I'm sorry, not Flight 11, Flight 77. Noah Fahadli was one of them. Now, what were they doing in Logan? Why were they there? Who are the other people? Well, 3 of them were dressed as airline employees. 3 were dressed as civilians, and they didn't have a pass to the tarmac, but they had an initial pass to get through the initial security checkpoint. What were they trying to do? Plant weapons on these planes? Like guns? Remember, there was a draft memo by American Airlines on the night of September 11th that talked about a person being shot in first class. Was it Daniel Lewin? Was it because the terrorists knew about this guy and figured he'd be a danger, so they shot him? I don't know. It's a theory. Could it be that there was a gun reported on Flight 77 because it was? Could it be that they found long knives, even bigger knives than the box cutters found in the debris field in Shanksville? This would lead to the news reports that they found later about, the knives, and, one incident was a bomb on these planes on September 13th to September 14th when the airline industry opened up. Now we're getting into the nitty gritty. Who are these people? Well, because this operation would involve a lot more people in the Islamic fundamentalist world, which would really paralyze the airline industry. So they had to condense it. It was just these 19 guys, and it was bin Laden and Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri. But we got them. We got Khalid Sheikh Mohammed too. We got them all. They did. They didn't get everybody. And Al-Qaeda is now bigger than it ever was under bin Laden. So that's the end of this video. We talked a lot here, and I'm glad we did, because these videos are really important. If there's any playlist that I publish, I think these breakdown videos are really important, because you're getting, prima facie material, and then, my additional thoughts, which, I'm hoping that you investigate on your own to see whether I'm accurate or not. I'm hoping you do that, because this is how you learn responsible journalism. All right. Listen, guys, thank you for tuning in. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you in the next video. Take care.